Namaste everyone. A very warm welcome to you on behalf of Aranya Vihar Trust in India. Today we have the fortune to have Venerable Ajahn Candasiri with us. Let's pay our respects together to Ajahn with 3 bows. Bow, bow, bow. Today Ajahn is joining us from Amravati Monastery. I'll just speak a few words about Ajahn, a very brief introduction for anyone who's meeting Venerable Ajahn for the first time. So Venerable Ajahn Candasiri is the abbess of the Miltum Hermitage in the country of her birth, which is Scotland. She worked as an occupational therapist in her lay life. Venerable Ajahn came across the Buddha's teachings in 1977 through Ajahn Sumedho, and inspired by his teachings and example, she began her monastic training in 1979 at Chithurst Monastery in England. Venerable Ajahn Candasiri is one of the senior-most monastics in the Western Theravada Buddhism. She is a well-respected elder, generously offering teachings at various forums, and also provides monastic trainings to the Anagarikas and Siladharas at Amravati Monastery. We are indeed very grateful that Venerable Ajahn is here with us to offer reflections on the topic, establishing oneself in Brahma Vihāras. Her personal presence exudes these states and her words invoke the gentleness of our own hearts. Friends, Brahma Vihāras, as we know, refer to what's called the divine abiding with the skillful mental states of Metta, Karuna, Mudita, and Upeka. So we will shortly invite Ajahn for the Dhamma reflections, and after the Dhamma reflections, we will open the floor for live questions and answers. So may I request Mrs. Sangeeta Kohli to please make the formal request to respected Ajahn for a Dhamma Desna.
ब्रह्मा च लोकाधिपति सहंपति कतंजलि अंधिवरं अयाचथ संतीध सत्ता परजख जातिका देशे तु धम्मं अनुकंपिमं भजन्.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. So, hello everybody. I felt very honored, very privileged to be invited to speak to you all today. And was very glad when I received notification of the topic, establishing oneself in the Brahma Vihāras. This is something that I consider a lot, because it feels to me that particularly during this time of the world pandemic, where so many people are very, very seriously challenged in their living situations, that these qualities, Metta, Karuna, Mudita, Upeka, are all very, very relevant, very significant for us in our lives. They obviously benefit us. Just experiencing these qualities in the heart is a very lovely thing. It's very lovely to experience these qualities of the heart, and also the effect on those around us can be quite tangible, one of the things about them is that it gives a kind of a strength, a kind of an independence. Because when life is confusing and difficult and frightening and just generally upsetting, being able to establish oneself in kindness, compassion, joyfulness and serenity really provides a very firm anchor from which to respond to the difficulties of both in our own life and for those around us. I've always been rather interested in these qualities because when I was first taught about them, they seemed like very wonderful aspirations. And with the first retreat I did with Ajahn Sumedho, and he gave guided meditations in the cultivation of Metta, Karuna, Mudita, Upeka. But what I found was that it didn't really seem to work so well for me in everyday life. You know, I could be kind and I could be compassionate in situations that weren't threatening or challenging to me in any way. It was easy to be kind to people and situations that I liked, and to be kind to, you know, small, you know, attractive animals. Like we have cats here at Amaravati. It's very easy to be kind to the cats, cuddle the cats, and but then there are certain situations, certain people where, for some reason, I would find that this kindness wouldn't come forth in quite the same way. It wasn't a natural thing to feel kindness, say to somebody who was irritating me or somebody who was challenging me in some way. There'd be a feeling of fear or a feeling of anger. And I would try to say, you know, may you be well, may you be happy. But somehow or other, it didn't really go very deep. It was rather artificial, rather superficial. So I began to contemplate this and came to an understanding that actually we really need to start here. We really need to start with learning how to show kindness, how to show compassion towards ourselves. So what does this mean? It means actually being rather honest with ourselves, rather curious about our own minds, about our attitudes, looking a little bit more deeply, rather than feeling that I should be kind to everybody, actually looking and seeing, coming to an appreciation of why that's difficult. What became clear to me was that it's difficult because I hadn't really learned how to be kind towards myself. And that meant much more than being kind towards the aspects of myself that I liked, appreciating the aspects of myself that were kind of worthy, noble. You know, it's easy to be glad and to feel a sense of acceptance and appreciation for one's, I don't know, generosity or patience, these kind of things. But much more difficult to feel appreciation or acceptance of grumpiness, irritability, anxiety, lack of confidence. You know, all of these less inspiring qualities that are there for each one of us. So it's interesting that the Buddha's teachings, the Four Noble Truths, it always starts off with suffering. The first noble truth, there is suffering, there is struggle. And I was fortunate in that my teacher, Ajahn Sumedho, and his teacher also, Ajahn Chah, they placed great emphasis on the Four Noble Truths as the basic teaching, the intermediate teaching, and the advanced teaching, to be able to really take an interest in suffering. Because as you all know, suffering is part of our life, and in order to liberate the heart from suffering, it needs to be understood. So this meant noticing when there was an inner struggle, when something was happening within our own minds, our own hearts, our own bodies even, that we didn't like, that we thought shouldn't be there, that we were embarrassed or ashamed about. Just noticing that struggle, that feeling that things should be different. This is what we call dukkha, wanting things to be other than the way that they are. So just recognizing that inner friction, that inner struggle, the inability to be at ease with the particular perception we have of ourselves at that moment. You know, shy, unsure, hesitant, confused, hopeless, inadequate, these feelings. Can we recognize those? Can we establish presence with those? Can we accept those just the way they are? This is part of human existence. Part of being a human being is that we experience these things. Human beings don't just experience nice things, don't just experience noble, wonderful things, but if we really want to learn about being a human being, we need to open our heart to the whole of it. So metta, kindness towards this being here. Can I open to this being here? Can I accept this being here? With all its wonderfulness, its beautiful qualities, and also with its less beautiful qualities, its difficulties, its challenges, its confusions, its fears. Can I accept that? Can I honor that as part of being a human being? What I found as a result of doing that, what I found was a much greater capacity to accept and appreciate other people with their difficulties. I had noticed that the things that I didn't like about other people, the people that I didn't like, tended to be the ones who were manifesting qualities that I hadn't accepted in myself. So as I accepted these feelings of anxiety, fear, and so on, I gradually began to be able to have a sense of tenderness, a sense of well-wishing towards others who were manifesting those qualities. I was much less harsh in my judgments, much less exacting or demanding in terms of how I felt that they should be. Much more ready to accept them as they were. So metta is sometimes translated as loving kindness, and that's the most usual translation of metta. But I like to think of it more just as acceptance, a giving a space for, accommodating, with a heart of friendliness, a willingness, an openness. It doesn't mean that we approve, if somebody's behaving very foolishly, doing things that are harmful. It's not that I have metta for their harmful speech or action. Certainly not. We don't condone the foolishness, but we condone, we have kindness for the human being who's manifesting those things. We have kindness, we also have compassion. Because again, as we investigate our own suffering, our own struggles, we come to appreciate just how painful it is if we do something that is unkind, something that is harmful towards somebody else or towards an animal even. there's always a price to pay. We don't get away with anything in this life. There's a result. So when we see people behaving in atrocious ways, we might maybe feel angry or upset or indignant, but just a moment's reflection can bring forth a sense of compassion. They don't really know what they're doing. They don't really know the harm that they're causing, either to somebody else, to the other people, to the situation, to the planet even, or to themselves. I've always been interested listening to His Holiness the Dalai Lama speaking about what happened to, or what's happening to his country, and the terrible atrocities that were committed towards his people. And it's happening also in other parts of the world. And I've always been interested in his response, which is basically a sense of concern for the people who are doing these terrible things, because there'll be a price. I've noticed in my own life, if I do something foolish or harmful towards somebody else, then when I come to sit in meditation, my mind is disturbed. There's a sense of regret or remorse, which is actually a wholesome quality. It's good to feel that, but it's not a pleasant state. It's not, we don't like it, but it's the natural consequence of having hurt somebody, having harmed somebody, having acted impulsively or foolishly. So karuna is compassion, compassion for the suffering of others, compassion also for our own suffering, our own struggle. And interestingly, again, what I've noticed is that I really need to begin here. As a nun, I'm quite frequently called upon to offer guidance or support to people who are struggling in different ways. People come and ask my advice about certain situations that they're facing in their lives. And one of the situations I used to find most challenging was if I was invited to go and accompany somebody who was towards the point of death, or in the middle of some very, very serious illness or difficulty. Because I think there was always a concern that I was going to say the wrong thing. I was going to make a mistake. I was going to make things worse in some way. I'd been a nun for a number of years, and I thought, well, I'm a nun. They're expecting me to say something wise, something that's going to be helpful and encouraging. And I'm afraid that maybe I'm going to mess up. I'm going to do something, say something that's not going to be helpful. And so I'd go into the situation. I remember with one lady I went to see, and I think I was the last person to visit her. And she died shortly after I had visited her. And she, I can't remember what exactly her question was, but she looked at me very, very intently. It was a very strong look, really wanted me to really was interested in what I would have to say. I think I'd said something about dying beautifully. And she said, well, what do you mean? And I came out with the answer, well, mindfully. And this wasn't an answer that was coming from a peaceful, settled place. It's an answer coming from a wanting to say the right thing. So it was one of those situations, and those of you who are familiar with Ajahn Chah's teaching will probably have heard it said, right but not true, true but not right. It was like that. It was the right answer, but it wasn't coming from the right place. And this lady, she was very outspoken, throughout her life. She could say the most shocking things. And she came out with the most foul swear word. And I thought, yeah, Candasiri, that's what you deserve. You know, it was like a real ticking off when I had come out with this trite answer, which in one way was completely the right answer, but it was coming from a place of anxiety, of wanting to get it right. If I had been present, if I had been mindful, I probably would have responded very differently. So how could I have shown compassion towards myself in that situation or in similar situations? You know, how do we bring compassion into a situation where somebody is at the point of death or in the middle of a very serious illness, or maybe, you know, recently bereaved? I mean, many of you, I imagine, have been in situations over these last weeks and months with people who are dying, people who are bereaved, maybe bereaved in very unfortunate circumstances, maybe not able to be with their loved ones who were dying, you know, very tragic situations. So how do we bring forth a real sense of compassion in that situation? It's obviously a situation where compassion is needed and can be helpful. But what does it look like in practice? Is it me going into the situation as the wise, compassionate friend, going to say the right thing to make things all right for that person? Or is it me going in with a heart of compassion for the whole situation, including my part in it? Am I able to really enter into the whole situations fully and completely, to give myself to it? To acknowledge my own sense of uncertainty, anxiety, to be able to be patiently with that, fully present with what's happening here and now, perhaps not having any idea what I'm going to say, no little storehouse of sort of catalogue of wise answers, you know, what you say for this situation or this situation. That all goes out of the window when we're really present. There's no particular idea or thought in the mind other than this sense of a compassionate willingness to bear with the pain of the situation, the pain of the person in their struggle, my own pain in wanting to do the right thing, to help, to support. And can I be fully with all of it? And what I've found is that when I can do that, rather than having an answer up here, an answer comes forth. Or it may be a comment, or it may just be silence, or it may be some kind of an action, doing something, or just sitting quietly. In my own life, sometimes when I've been very ill, I've had a couple of very serious illnesses in my life, and it's been very interesting to be on the receiving end of different responses from people who come to visit. You know, some people trying hard to say the right thing and saying exactly the wrong thing. Other people kind of really awkward, obviously wanting to help, to be kind. And of course, you know, there's an appreciation of all of that. And then just noticing how there are other people who just come and they're just quietly there. And you see that sometimes that's the most supportive thing. So rather than feeling that I have to do something compassionate or I have to say something compassionate, sometimes that's appropriate and sometimes that's what comes forth and that's fine. Sometimes just being there, just quietly there, being willing to be fully with the situation rather than trying to make it all right and get away as quickly as possible. So karuna has a depth to it and a subtlety to it. It requires a giving up of the sense of self. Me going to do the compassionate thing for you, me going to help you, me going to make everything all right for you. It becomes us. There's no longer me and you, there's just us. As fellow human beings. Not even thinking of it like that, there's just presence. Mudita is the third in the list of the Brahma Vihāras, and this is one that has been most interesting for me. Mudita, translated as altruistic joy, appreciative joy, sympathetic joy. And often the further description is like gladness at the good fortune of others. And I was always very challenged by this, because sometimes I could feel glad at the good fortune of others. But if somebody else had something that I really wanted or thought I didn't have, what tended to happen instead was jealousy, envy, a really unpleasant mind state. In fact, it was that actually brought me into this spiritual practice right in the beginning, because I was so troubled by my lack of ability to celebrate somebody's good fortune. So jealousy is a very unpleasant condition. And what I found in my own practice was that not only was there jealousy, but there was also the aversion to the jealousy, the hating the jealousy and hating myself. So it all got very complicated, very unpleasant, very difficult. And absolutely no sense of gladness at the good fortune of somebody else. So it's only relatively recently that I've really figured out what the problem was, where I was going wrong with this. There's a chant that we do, and it's actually a passage from the scriptures, and it's repeated very frequently in many of the suttas, where it says, the disciple abides, pervading one quarter with a mind of, say, gladness, take mudita. Likewise the second, likewise the third, likewise the fourth, so above and below, around and everywhere. And to all as to myself. Now, I hadn't really sort of understood that. I knew about having kindness towards myself. I knew about having compassion towards myself. But I hadn't properly appreciated the importance of being able to celebrate the blessings and the goodness and the joy of my own life. I hadn't really appreciated the fact that I could feel mudita, I could feel gladness towards my own life, my own being, my own existence. I was imagining or feeling that I had to feel it, towards this other person or this situation, to celebrate the beauty of the situation and just be glad about everybody having a good time or whatever it was. But what I was experiencing was they were having a good time, and this being here there was a kind of emptiness, a kind of bleakness, and a real hatred and negativity towards everybody and towards this. So when I actually thought about this, mudita towards myself, to all as to myself, as to myself, whereas actually it has to start off here. So I found it really works. So if there's a situation where I feel, I still occasionally feel little twinge of jealousy arising sometimes. So if I notice that arising, rather than worrying about it or feeling that I shouldn't have it or getting complicated about it, I just say, okay, Candasiri, what about you? You have this, and this, and I would enumerate the good fortune, the blessings of my life. There's always something to celebrate, always something. May not be very much, but there's always something to celebrate, to feel glad about, something that one has done well, or even just the very fact that we've come across this path, this way of practice, this way to lead us out from suffering, that can bring joy. So making much of our own good fortune, much of our successes. Now, for many of us, I mean, particularly in the culture where I grew up, we weren't really encouraged to think very much about the things that we did well, the good things about ourselves. We were more encouraged to think about our faults, our difficulties, our shortcomings. That was what we were encouraged to make much of. So it took a little while to kind of get the hang of it. And I think, in fact, I know that my mother was very worried that I might get conceited, I might get big-headed, if I thought too much about, my own good qualities. So I never really learned how to do that. What I found, strangely enough, is that doesn't seem to happen. What arises is a sense of gladness, a sense of mudita, a sense of celebration. This life has been good. There are good things that have happened as a result of this life that I've lived. Okay, I've made lots of mistakes, but there are good things. So to learn how to celebrate that, to bring a sense of blessing into the heart. I remember one time at Chithurst, and I might have told you this story before, I was on retreat, and one of the things that happens when I go on self-retreat is that I often end up totally miserable because, I don't have very good concentration. Meditation is, plenty of room for improvement. And so rather than being able to celebrate any successes, I would get very caught up in the things that weren't good enough. And I remember one time just waiting, I think I was waiting for the meal or something, and just feeling pretty glum. And then thinking about the Buddha, the Blessed One. And I thought, oh, Candasiri, you're not very blessed, are you? Not very filled with blessings. There's no sense of blessing in your heart. And realizing that I don't have to wait for other people to fill my heart with blessings, but I can fill my heart with blessings. So really learning how to do that. And the more we can do that, the consequence is a real sense of appreciation and joy for the good things, the beautiful things that we see around us. When there's an ordination ceremony, for example, you just feel really glad, really happy for somebody going forth. Or the other day, I rescued a small creature. It was our quiet day. I'd gone for a walk and I had a picnic, and a little flying something, I'm not sure what it was, landed up in my soup. And I thought, oh dear. And I kind of fished it out and I put it on a tissue and it recovered. And I just felt so happy. And then it flew away. Just a real sense of gladness that this little creature had survived. So it can be about very small things, but it can also be about much bigger things. Sometimes in festivals, in ceremonies, I used to feel very grumpy because, everyone else was having a good time and I wasn't feeling very interested, didn't want to do what they were doing. Rather than being able to enter into it with a full heart. So mudita is about filling up one's own heart, filling it up so it's overflowing and there's just a natural sense of joy and delight at the goodness and beauty around us, being able to see it, celebrating the beauty that you see, people's acts of kindness. I mean, that's one of the things about the pandemic and the terrible things about it, but also it's brought forth enormous acts of kindness and heroism. These things that you hear about, the heart just feels glad. That's mudita. Equanimity or serenity, upeka, is a very special quality. It's sometimes translated as indifference, which to me in English means a kind of almost like not caring. And I think there are some people who are attracted to the Buddhist teachings because they like the idea of not having to care, a kind of dispassion, standing back from life. But I have a feeling that actually Upeka is a much fuller, much more engaged quality than simply indifference. As far as I can understand it, it requires a maturity of the heart that recognizes that life in life we can experience a whole range of different things, and that the human realm, within the human realm, there's the capacity to experience the most extraordinary bliss and happiness and joy, extraordinary beauty, much to celebrate, much to just really delight in, and also the most extremely horrific, dreadful conditions, a whole range. And for me, it seems that Upeka is about actually being able to stay present, whatever the condition might be, just to stay fully present. There's a wonderful verse in the Mahamangala Sutta that I'm always quoting, Putasaloka Dhammehi Chittanyasana Kampati. So though living in the world, though touched by the world, yet the heart does not tremble. We have some wonderful trees here, poplar trees, and the leaves shake like this, Kampati. And for the heart to not tremble, the heart to stay steady, to stay still, to stay present, when the conditions are absolutely wonderful, absolutely beautiful, and equally when the conditions are absolutely appalling. As I said, this requires a kind of maturity of the heart. And my sense is that sometimes we need to recognize our limitations. You know, in my own practice, there are certain situations that if I can avoid them, then I will, because I have a sense that the heart can't bear it. You know, it's not strong enough. There's not enough of a stability with whatever the situation might be. If I absolutely don't have a choice, then I engage with it. But there's one situation, I think it was after the tsunami some years ago at Christmas time, and hearing stories of volunteers going in Thailand, I think it was, going to kind of help just with just clearing up and the bodies, and just having to manage quite extreme, quite awful situations, and being able to keep it together while they were there, but then having complete collapse afterwards, just almost as though they put themselves into something that their heart wasn't ready for, they weren't able to bear. So knowing one's capacity can be a skillful response to these things. So it's a tricky one. Perhaps it's more about knowing one's capacity, knowing when one needs to take a break. Like I always encourage people who are looking after someone who's sick or dying, you know, make sure you have some time on your own each day. You don't feel you have to stay in that situation 24 hours, you know, non-stop. Try to make sure that you have a time on your own. And even if you can't get out into nature, just at least be with yourself, come to the breath, as an act of kindness towards the whole situation, looking after yourself. don't expect more of yourself than you actually have the capacity for. So it's kind of a balancing. And maybe with any kind of balancing, we have to fall over into one extreme or the other before and topple over before we come back into the middle, finding the middle way. So these 4 Brahma Vihāras are very, very extraordinary, beautiful qualities. They're divine qualities, they're qualities of the Brahma realm. And I was reading a sutta this morning about how if you develop these qualities, then you'll be good chance that you'll be reborn in the Brahma realm. But if you would like to even surpass that and enter into Nibbana, then develop the Brahma Vihāras, but see them as part of the flow of life, changing conditions, anicca, dukkha, anatta. So to be developed, to be cultivated, give it all you've got, but see beyond it. Cultivating the middle way, the way of letting go. So we can create, we can transform ourselves into a conduit for these beautiful qualities, but see them all as being changing, unsatisfactory ultimately, and not who and what we are. But qualities that the world very, very badly needs right now. Held with a sense of inner balance, inner steadiness, just as what we can do in our lives for the welfare of ourselves and the welfare of everybody else. So I'm aware that there's so many other things I could have said, but I'm also aware that the idea was that I would talk a bit and then offer a chance for people to ask questions. And so perhaps it's time to end my formal talk and to see what questions you might have, what you'd like me to say a little bit more about. So thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Ajahn. So now we have the opportunity to ask questions to Ajahn. So you could either raise your virtual hand on Zoom, in which case we'll invite you to ask your question. And I think that's a more helpful way to ask the question, because you'll be able to describe it better for yourself. Or you could also type into the co-host Deepti, and we will call out your question. Yes, Sumrit, go ahead.
Dear Ajahn, I had a question regarding, like you said, to know your capacity. How do you deal in, like I have been in situations before, probably I was not much aware of my capacity, or I was just getting influenced by other people. So I ended up in a very, very tough situation. It was a couple of years back. But when I came out of that, people were questioning me, why didn't you get out? Even if I had a choice, was not like I was bound, but I was just under that pressure, like, I have to be obedient to the elders, what they are saying. I could have easily walked out. I was not in a very blood relations with the people with whom I was staying. And the more I ended up staying, I felt only after I came out, I realized it was more abusive relationship there. I could have easily walked out. They were not my father or my mother. It was just completely different set of people. And I ended up realized it led me into a lot of trauma for myself. Even it started showing up in my workplace, and only after periods of meditation, I was able to come out of it. I still feel that grief and trauma for staying in that traumatic situation where I could have easily come out. And at that time, because there was that verbal abuse, I also shut myself off from other people. Like that really had a very dramatic effect on my self-esteem. And when I came out of that, and other people were asking me, why did you stay in that situation? You could have easily come out. And there's a sense of remorse and regret, even on the top of that, for continuing to endure that and not being able to judge my capacity. So how do I deal with these things? I know I like grieve a lot, that fully, to be aware of those feelings, but still there's a sense of hatred towards oneself for staying in that situation when I could have made that choice to withdraw myself from those people.
It's so easy, isn't it, to look back and see what you should have done or you could have done. This is what we do, isn't it? When we make a mistake, when we do something that has an unfortunate consequence, we think what we should have done, what we could have done. But if we could have done, then we probably would have done. If we'd known what we know now, we would have responded differently. At the time, I'm sure you weren't aware of how much it was harming you, and how much better you would have been if you had got out of the situation. But when you were in it, you had no idea. So it's only from where you are now. So there needs to be a kind of forgiveness, capacity to say to yourself, well, you did the best you could. You thought you were doing the right thing. Maybe you were afraid. There are all kinds of reasons why people stay in these difficult situations. Afraid of letting somebody down, afraid of letting yourself down, not living up to the ideals that you have of how you should be. So many reasons. We make life very complicated. So in this situation that you're describing, what you need to do, or listen to me, what might be helpful is just to consider, how can I bring Brahma Vihāras towards me? Can I be kind towards me? Can I forgive me? Can I be compassionate for my own suffering? How difficult the situation was, how much I'm struggling now. So really try to avoid blaming yourself, because that doesn't help anybody. It just complicates things. So cultivate a heart of kindness towards yourself. And having been through that, you've learned something. You've learned something very significant, very important. So you can be an expert now. You know that if you stay in a situation, an abusive situation, when there could possibly be a way to get out of it, that's going to harm you. You know that. So you're not going to make the same mistake again. So I would encourage you to learn as much as you can about what happened, and to see that as a very positive thing in your life, that you've learned a very important lesson about how important it is to take care of this. If you're caring for someone else, and if you don't take care of this, of your own being, you're not going to be much use to the other person. So it's not that we do it in a selfish way, because we don't care about the other person. We do it precisely because we do care about the other person. We want to be able to support them for as long as possible. So we have to take care of this. Just like if you have a car, you have to put petrol in it. Otherwise it'll stop. It won't keep going. And the same way, if you're in a situation with others and trying to help them or support them, if you don't look after this one, then you're not going to be any use to them. So sometimes we do have to say, okay, I need to get out of this. Maybe it's just for a week, you have to go away somewhere else. Maybe you just have to step out for an indefinite period of time, because you care, because you want the best for everybody. So although self-sacrifice can seem like a very noble thing, it can also not be the most sensible response to a situation. So I wonder, I hope that makes some sense.
Yeah, yes, definitely. Thank you.
All the very best.
Thank you very much.
Anishi, would you like to ask the next question?
Ajahn, thank you for the wonderful talk and reflections that you have put across to me. My question is towards the point of having metta towards yourself, compassion towards yourself, mudita and upeka towards oneself. I mean, it's after I got in touch with the forest tradition that this whole concept started to come forward. But sometimes, I mean, I have a slight conflict in the mind. I mean, at one time we're talking about anatta, that there is no self. And we're trying to give compassion to myself. So who is the guy giving the compassion to who? And there is a duality over here. And at one, I mean, am I conflicting with the tradition as to, at one stage we're talking of dissolving the, getting into anatta state. So I need a little bit of some teachings from you, Ajahn, please, on this.
Yeah, it can seem like a kind of madness. This is true. Talking to yourself and so on. So what could I say about that? I mean, there's no doubt that there is some kind of a being here. There is a body here. There is a mind. It's because of, I mean, the sense of self is the thing that creates problems. And the sense of self is something that we create because we don't really see clearly. We don't really understand the way things are. So there is a the teaching is, yeah, this is not a self. And the Buddha's guidance is to encourage us to constantly challenge all the assumptions we make about me, who and what I am. So you're absolutely right about that. That's what we're encouraged to do. However, being not fully enlightened yet, there is definitely a sense of somebody here. So the Sister Candasiri exists as a conventional identity. When I'm totally quiet and present with whatever the situation might be, that sense of identity is no longer valid. It's just, there's just being. And we all of us experience moments of just being. But in our daily lives, we can be aware of our suffering. We can be aware of the struggle, which is, as I said, usually related to atta, although the body, of course, can experience a lot of pain, discomfort, cold, heat, hunger, and so on. So it's like bringing forth these qualities just towards this being along with all other beings. But we have to start off here. What seems to happen, and there's a phrase in the Buddha's words on loving kindness about, having, even as a mother protects with her life her child, her only child, so with a boundless heart should one cherish all living beings. And for years, I used to imagine that I should cherish all other living beings, but I never included this one. So learning how to include oneself as part of all living beings and to begin here. So in some ways, it's easier as the sense of self begins to get challenged and chipped away at. because we might think, oh, I shouldn't be kind towards this one. I shouldn't have compassion towards this one. But if you just see yourself as another being, another part of struggling humanity, with all the wonderful things of your life and all the difficult things of your life, in some ways it's easier. There's less involvement. We don't make it so complicated. So it's a subtle and it's a difficult question, but a very important question. And I hope that some of what I've said can maybe throw a little bit of light onto what you are asking.
I have this confusion many a time when I ask this question to myself. And today I had the guts to really ask it.
Yes.
But I will try. Thank you, Ajahn. Thank you very much.
Something you can try in your meditation sometimes is just to sort of ask, when you're sitting quietly, just say, who's here? Who's here? And that take you to the place of just awareness. And there is an awareness of the body and the mind and of any agitation or difficulty there. That's been my experience anyway.
Ajahn, the next question is that how do we feel something positive about someone when we see it might be harmful for them? If it seems that this will lead to suffering for them in the future, even though they are happy about it at the moment.
Can you just read the very first part of the question again?
How do we feel something positive about someone when we see that what they are doing might be harmful for them?
Okay, yeah. Thank you. Well, if that's something that we notice, if we notice that somebody's doing something that might be harmful for them, then we may not feel positive about what it is that they're doing. There may be a sense of concern. We can still feel positive about them, but if we see that they're doing something that's going to be harmful, then we're not going to feel positive about it. Even if they think it's wonderful. I mean, maybe somebody, I don't know, buys a new house or something, or wins a lottery and gets £1 million or 1 million rupees or 10 million rupees or 1,000, I don't know how many, a lot of rupees, a lot of money. But they don't really know how to use it for their welfare or for the welfare of others. And we don't, so there can be a sense of gladness that they're happy, but at the same time, there can also be a sense of concern. And in such a situation, I mean, depending on the relationship, there may be a feeling that I should say something or offer them some kind of guidance and support in how to manage this situation. And so we can very easily get into a kind of sense of over concern and worry, and feeling that I've got to say something. And what I find for myself is really important in such a situation, I might have a tremendous fondness for somebody. I see that they're experiencing what they see as, tremendously good fortune, but I might see trouble down the road. And so I can feel a pressure to try to intervene or help in some way. And I have to be very careful just to stand back and actually attune to my own struggle with it. So bringing forth a sense of compassion for this being here. If that doesn't sound too complicated, because I want to be able to respond to what they see as their good fortune in a way that's going to be helpful, that's going to bring benefit. And I don't think that their view of it is what's going to be most beneficial for them. So how can I support them in a happy outcome, in behaving in a way that's going to bring a happy outcome? It may be that I just have to watch them make a lot of mistakes and be there for them as a good friend. Or it may be that actually there is something I can do or say. Or it may be that I can, just through holding them in my heart with a sense of concern, that some situation arises that enables them to see for themselves that they need to be very careful. So with all of these Brahma Vihāras, it's about really being very, very present with whatever it is that we may be experiencing, recognizing the tendency of the mind to create future scenarios and feel that we have to intervene, but just coming back. How is it right now? What's happening here now? You know, how can I support this situation in the best possible way? So I don't know if that makes sense, but I do empathize, because it's not an easy thing, particularly if it's somebody that you really care about. And so we have to acknowledge our own fear that something terrible is going to happen to them, a sense of concern, a sense of anticipating what might happen. You know, the mind can go into creating all kinds of extra things. But all we know right now is that this thing is happening for them, that they're glad about it, and that we are feeling a bit concerned. That's what we can know. So to keep coming back to what we can know, the present moment.
John, the next question, I believe Apurji would like to ask. Apurji, you could unmute yourself and please go ahead.
Namaste, Ajahn. Really pleasure to hear your talk. And I had this earlier question related to Mudita, which was addressed already through your talk. And I would like to just apply what you had shared in the situations where Mudita has to be experienced or invited. So the question now that remains came out of the thoughts that you shared with Anishji just a while back about looking at all creatures like a mother takes care of her only child with the same compassion. So here is the moral dilemma for which I would request your thoughts. So for the past year, the main entrance to the house has been having a bout of termites, which was pointed out by my wife about a year back. And I have been almost on a daily basis, I've been sending them metta. And I've been also telling them that they're not welcome here and they should not damage my property. And it's been about a year now. And now I've been, of late, I've been getting these thoughts or this dilemma where I'm just beginning to border on the thoughts of whether I should actually invite somebody who is dealing with pest control to take a look at the damage, or should I just continue to keep on sending Maitri or Metta, and then eventually when the door frame has to be changed, which would involve cost and inconvenience to everybody in the house, just do that maybe another year or 2 years down the line. So I would invite your thoughts about that.
Yes. It's very difficult. I mean, I think it's something that everybody experiences in one way or another. Different situations. We had a similar thing with rats here at Amaravati at one time, and they were chewing through the electrics in one of the houses, and actually it was quite dangerous. And what we did in the end, we had to, somebody invited the pest control, the rat people, and the evening before the rat people came, we did a whole bunch of chanting Metta Sutta, all kinds of things. And it was a very nice chant that I think it's called the snake protection chant, which is basically says, we love you, the two-footed, the four-footed, the many-footed, the low-footed, we love you, but please go away. Please feel free to go your way. So we chanted in Pali, and then in English, I said very clearly, I said, look, rats, you need to go. You really need to go. And if you don't go, something terrible is going to happen. So to try to just invite them to go, to encourage them to go in that way. It was kind of like the best we could do. We didn't want to kill them at all. We didn't want to harm them, but it was necessary under the circumstances. So there's a story about Ajahn, in fact, at Wat Pah Pong. I think they had a similar situation with ants eating all the buildings and all the monks' belongings as well. And in the end, I believe he kind of took responsibility. So sometimes you just have to do that. And it's not at all a situation that you celebrate or feel glad about. But the alternative is, I think we can sometimes be a bit too idealistic. You know, it's feeling I should be able to bear this, because it in the end, you end up feeling frustrated and upset, and everybody else feels frustrated and upset. And the teachings of the Buddha are like very, very useful guidelines, and the precepts are very, very important, very significant guidelines. And every now and again, there may be a situation where you have to go against these recommendations. But the reason that they're there is because they ensure that you don't do it without really considering the alternatives. So it sounds to me as though you've done your best, you've really considered alternatives. And as far as you can tell, that this is the only option at this point. So you do it, you make a conscious decision, not that you're glad about it, but just because this is, as far as you can tell, this is the best you can do right now. So you can ask their forgiveness. You say, I'm really, really sorry about this. It's not what I want to do, but we can't live in this way together. If there's a way to kind of gather them up and put them somewhere else, and that's another option, but that may not be very realistic. Yeah.
Thank you.
Difficult.
I think it will put things in perspective and make it easier. The difficult decision will make it easier. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Ajahn, the next question is that how to live a peaceful life as a lay person who has to make a living in this world, having a job, having to face all the things that society pushes on us, like advertisements, violence, lust, etc. What could be some of the suggestions to overcome these difficulties?
Right. I think living in the world as a human being is immensely challenging. And living in a lay situation, as opposed to a monastery, you are exposed to many more unwholesome, unpeaceful stimuli. So, just meeting a lot of people who maybe don't have the same interest in practice that you have, having to see advertising, like, I don't know what it's like where you live, but in London, when I go into London, even on the sides of buses, they have these sort of enormous figures and writing and all kinds of things on the sides of buildings everywhere. So there's a lot of stimulation, and a lot of, and most advertising is designed to stimulate greed or lust, one kind or another of greed or lust or fear. So newspapers are wonderful for bringing a lot of fear. Watching the news on TV, full of things to worry about and be frightened of. So number one thing is to actually really be very conscious of the extent to which you're exposed to stimulation of different kinds, and to consider carefully whether there are ways to reduce the amount of stimulation you receive through the senses. It's interesting, when one of our Sakya rules, the rules about proper deportment when we go out of the monastery, like when we go on alms round, is that we're not supposed to look around very much. Just keep our gaze on the pavement, on the road where we're walking, rather than looking in all the shop windows and everything. So to realize that there is a choice when you walk around, what you look at, what you fill your mind with, the impressions that you fill your mind with. If you're living on your own, obviously you can regulate whether you watch TV, whether you buy newspapers or listen to the radio and so on. You can regulate the amount of things that you expose yourself to in that way. When you're with other people, noticing the effect of different kinds of conversation. And if you can, avoid getting into conversations which stimulate unhelpful responses to things. For example, if you're among a group of people who may be complaining about the government or complaining about, I don't know, one thing or another, or about each other, you can notice the effect of that on the mind and realize, often you might just think, well, actually, I don't need to talk like that about the situation or about other people. It's challenging, and it requires that each person takes responsibility for how they live their life and what they expose themselves to, recognizing that naturally there are going to be things that you have to see and hear and smell and so on. So it's not sort of you create a kind of a holy bubble around yourself so you don't experience anything, but to see, to consider, wisely consider, do I really need to go here? Do I really need to do that? Do I really need to read this or listen to this? Just considering. One of the things I did when I was an Anagarika, this was before it was clear that we were going to be able to take the 10 precepts. So way back in the early 80s, where it wasn't clear that we were going to be able to give up using money, I decided, like it was about the last year of my Anagarika life, I just wasn't going to use my own money. So I used to go to town, I used to do shopping for the monastery, but I decided never to spend any of my own money. Whereas before, I always used to go, and whenever I went anywhere, I had quite a lot of money, so I used to buy things for the monastery, things that the monastery needed, teapots, kettles, sweets, things like that. And that was just what I did when I went, on errands for the monastery. But for the last year, I stopped doing that. And you wouldn't believe how much more peaceful my mind was when I would go to town. So you could experiment with having a day when you go out without your mobile phone and without any money, without any cards. Just experiment, see the effect on the mind, and give yourself a moneyless day or a medialess day. I have a couple of days a week when I try to avoid doing emails, and that makes a huge difference. So certainly living as a layperson is challenging. It's not easy, especially if you live in the city, a crowded city. There's going to be a lot of impingement, but I'd strongly encourage a daily meditation practice. If you've done walking meditation, if you know how to do that, then to make your walks in the city like a walking meditation time. So, try to be conscious of the kind of thoughts you're having, trying to be fully present with the body, learn how to direct the thoughts in a wholesome way. So if you've got a lot of worry happening, just come into the body, relax the body, find ways to calm and settle yourself. These are things that can be very helpful. So you begin to make the whole of your life a meditation, and to make the city into your monastery. That's a bit more challenging. But these are a few suggestions. Try to keep your room or your house, tidy, so that there isn't kind of mess everywhere. So that you don't have too many things on the walls that stimulate the mind. You may not have any choice in this, I realize, but if you, or even just having a shrine, have a one small area of a room which is special, which is kept clean and lovely. If you have a flower and a Buddha image, that's just like a place that you can go and the mind can just settle, can just support a kind of mind. So I think just realizing how we're affected by our surroundings and considering whether there are ways to choose what you surround yourself with, what you expose yourself to. This is very important. Those are some ideas which I hope are helpful.
Yeah, indeed, very helpful ideas for lay life, Ajahn. So I would invite Murli ji to ask the next question.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. I wanted to ask a question regarding the Brahma Vihāras only. So is that Brahma Vihāra will be helpful as to enter into the jhanas and is that the way, gateway towards jhanas? That's a question.
That's your question. It's interesting because some of the passages in the suttas, they actually describe the jhanas and the kind of sequence is to go through the jhanas and then to abide, pervading the whole world with a heart of kindness and compassion, joyfulness and serenity. So it seems to happen in the other direction. But my sense is that in fact, it can go in any direction. And that basically, I think for jhana to arise, there needs to be a basis of well-being. And certainly the Brahma Vihāras do bring about that sense of gladness in the heart, a sense of settledness, a sense of well-being, a sense of mindfulness, being collected and gathered. So I suppose one way of looking at it would be that, there's kind of that there are kind of different levels of refinement, and perhaps, the way that it's described in the suttas is that the just natural outcome of having set aside the coarser states of mind is the radiance of the Brahma Vihāras. I mean, they're described as very radiant, very beautiful, sublime qualities. But equally, just actually learning how to be patient with a difficult situation. So setting aside the feeling of impatience, just being able to rest in a situation just as it is, can be a basis for the arising of the jhanas. I have to say I'm really not an expert in the jhana practice, so I can't give you a very full and knowledgeable answer, but those would be some reflections that I could offer at this point. So I hope that's helpful.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Rajendra ji, would you like to go with your question?
Yes, I would. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. As in, we were just talking about pests and insects who create problems in our day-to-day life. And then we do prayers and they don't listen, but somehow we have to take the necessary action. in order to safeguard ourselves. Now, when we talk about human beings, where we have terrorists, we have rapists, and we have gruesome murderers. So there is a thinking going on that there should be no capital punishment against such crimes, and they should be let to live. It looks very, very annoying and very disturbing also for the society when such people who have done so much crime would be allowed to not get the capital punishment. What is your opinion about that, as per Dhamma?
From the point of view of Dhamma, I think we have to appreciate that people only do terrible things because they're suffering. If you look into your own life, and when I look into my life, the times that I've really hurt people or done foolish, bad things have been times that I've been very confused and upset myself. So I think I can understand society feeling we must get rid of these people. They don't deserve to live. I can understand that one might have that thought, but it's not a thought that I would at all support or encourage myself, because it implies a lack of understanding of our humanity. So I would encourage a much more creative response to such situations. And unfortunately, I don't know if there are the resources to do this on a big scale, but what would be much more wonderful would be if there were the resources for these people to be supported in living in ways that were less harmful. What that would look like, I don't know, but channeling their energy in more positive ways, because when you do good things, that brings a lot of joy in the heart. You know, if you find ways to help other people, that brings a lot of joy. In the UK, in fact, there are programs for prisoners to do kind of like volunteer work in different situations. And depending on the nature of their crime, obviously it's quite carefully managed. But you can see that it brings a sense of self-respect to be able to do something constructive, to see the results of having done something constructive, helpful. So I would want to support these people in bringing forth wholesome qualities in their lives in any way that it could possibly be done. I understand that there are certain kinds of mental illness where people just don't have the capacity to respond in what you would call a normal way. And in those situations, at least to try to live their lives in a way that can bring some kind of benefit. It's a very challenging question you've asked, a very good question. And I hope that my answer goes some way towards answering it. I don't have a perfect solution. I wish I did, but that's actually the best I can offer right now.
Ajahn, there's one more question. Is it okay if we take it?
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine.
Sumrit, you could go next.
Thank you, Ajahn. Sorry, I had one more question that came up. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you fine. Yep.
Okay, fine. Thank you. I am really motivated by your thoughts and pieces of wisdom. My another question is regarding the feeling of jealousy you brought up during the talk. So having witnessed our own jealousy by sitting in our meditation, like especially at the fortune of others, I mean, we still have restraint on not doing anything harmful, even we know that we are witnessing that jealousy. But at the same time, let's say when you are getting success, especially at the workplace, then you know that there might be a set of people who might be jealous of your success. So that brings a lot of fear in you at the same time. And you decide not to come in a lot of limelight to stay like, but it's like still creates fear, like because somebody or other will bring this up with your manager, somebody might bring this up with your colleagues. And at the same time, even if you want to stay in low limelight, sometimes it can be misconstrued as you're not participating as well as you should be. So how do you strike a balance in such a situation and deal with those feelings of fear because of that jealousy might getting stimulated in other people at your fortune?
That's an interesting question, isn't it? I suppose it's something that if we've experienced a lot of jealousy ourselves, that we might imagine that other people would be jealous of us. I think it's important to be careful about making assumptions about what other people might be feeling. Because, I mean, maybe somebody will feel jealousy, but maybe other people will be glad that you're doing all right, that you're succeeding. So I think we need to try to keep our life rather simple and try not to have too many ideas about what other people might be thinking. If somebody comes along and tells you that they're jealous, or if somebody treats you in an unpleasant way, which is often a sign of jealousy, then that's when we can begin to have a concern for that other person. And what I usually find for myself is more a sense of compassion, because I know how unpleasant it is to feel jealous of somebody. It's just such a horrible feeling. And so I would make an effort to show kindness to the person, not to say, well, I've done so well and I can see you haven't done so well, so you must be feeling really bad about the fact that I've done so well. That's not always so helpful, but more just, to support them in counting their own blessings. So they might, and one of the interesting things about jealousy, it's very difficult to admit. So there may be somebody who's feeling jealous of you, and if you challenge them about it, they might say, oh, no. But you kind of have a sense that, yes, they are jealous. So rather than actually challenging them about it, it's just more saying, well, I've noticed that you've done this really well, or had you thought about trying this? Just considering what will be lovely for them. And one of the interesting things I've found is that when I think about what I can do that's lovely for somebody else, the sense of fear seems to disappear. It seems that fear and kindness don't seem to go very well together. So, this is not directly related to jealousy, but one of the neighbours where I live in Scotland, this farmer, and I had a lot of problems with him. We had disagreements over water, which is interesting, disagreements over boundaries. And I was very intimidated. I was very frightened of him because he was a big man and could be very abusive. I mean, he used to speak very badly to me. And so I was quite frightened. But then he was an older man, and I began to think what a miserable life he had, and to begin to consider, well, what can I do that would make his life more wonderful? Is there something I could do that would make him happy. And so sometimes I would, just leave a gift. Like one of the people who were staying with me made a pie, and we took the pie down to his house and offered it to him. And he had cows. So I took some photographs of his cows because I knew he loved his cows. And as soon as I started thinking of lovely things I could do to make him happy, the fear just stopped being an issue. So these are some things that you could maybe think about in relation to the situation you describe.
Sure, because it has happened to me in the past in my previous workplace where
Yes.
I was doing good work, but at the same time, towards the time of my end days of my there, people were really getting jealous, or they were not very appreciative, and I was one of the persons being laid out also. So that becomes very difficult. So that kind of baggage I'm still carrying over in my new position. So that's why it becomes very difficult.
So having compassion for yourself and for your own fear. Fear is very, very prevalent. I mean, I think most people are frightened of somebody or other. A lot of fear in relationships. So we really need to understand that and acknowledge it. So having kindness towards your fear, being able to be present towards your fear is a really good thing to try to develop. So you can actually, rather than thinking about it, analyzing it, it's more just to feel it directly. Just notice how it affects your shoulders, your face, your belly, and just relaxing with thoughts of, may this being be well? May I be well? So just really bringing up thoughts of kindness towards yourself. And that brings a tremendous kind of strength. Filling your heart with blessings, and then you can share them.
Thank you very much. Those were really inspiring words. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Thank you for your question.
John, that brings us to an end of the questions and answers. So for a moment, if I could invite Sangeeta ji back for Anumodana.
Handamayang Dhammakathaye sadhukaram dadamase. Sadhu, 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 anumodami.
John, thank you so much for the wonderful words of wisdom and such heartful words. I would like to believe that everybody's heart would have opened up a little more for ourselves also, which is something we keep neglecting.
So Tipi So, as a reminder of the triple gem, Brahma Vihāras as the reminder to fill the heart with blessings and just allow it to extend in all directions, to all as to myself. And then the Ahang Sakita Homi, which is a kind of quieter, more inward, reflective chant, just recollecting qualities of kindness, compassion, joyfulness, and serenity. Itipiso bhagavaraham samma sambuddho vichacharana sampanno sugato lokavidu anuttaro purisadhamma sarati sata deva manusanang buddho bhagavati sawakato bhagavata dhammo sanditiko akaliko ehipa siko hopanahiko pachatang vedita bhovinyu iti supatipanno bhagavato savaka sangho uchupatipanno bhagavato Vakasangho Ujjupatipanno Bhagavato Savakasangho Samichipatipanno Bhagavato Savakasangho Yadidham Chatari Purisayuga Niyata Purisabhogala Esa Bhagavato Savakasangho Ahuneyo Ahuneyo Takineyo Anjali Karaniyo Anuttarang Punya Ketang Lokasati Meta Sahakatena Chetasa Ekam Disang Paritawa Viharati Tata Tatiyang Tata Tatiyang Tata Chatutang Itiyu Amato Tiriyang Sabati Sabha Tataya Sabha Vantang Lokang Meta Sahakate Nachetasa Vipulena Mahagatena Pamanena Hawe Rena Paya Pajena Paritawa Viharati Karuna Sahagatena Chetasa Ekang Disang Paritawa Viharati Tata Tutiyang Tata Tatiyang Tata Chatutang Itiyu Dhammato Tiriyang Sabati Sabha Tataya Sabha Wantang Lokang Karuna Sahakatena Chetasa Vipulena Mahakatena Hapamanena Havirena Paya Pajena Paritawa Viharati Mudita Sahakatena Chetasa Eka Disang Varitawa Viharati Tata Tutiyang Tata Tatiyang Tata Chatutang Itiyu Dhammato Tiriyang Sabati Sabha Tataya Sabha Vantang Lokam Mudita Sahakatena Chetasa Vipule Namaha Katena Hapamanena Havirena Paya Pajena Paritawa Viharati Upeka Sahagatena Chetasa Ekang Disang Paritawa Viharati Tata Tutiyang Tata Tatiyang Tata Chatutang Itiyu Dhammato Tiriyang Sabati Sabha Tataya Sabha Vantang Lokang Upeka Sahagatena Tasa Vipulena Mahagatena Hapamanena Havirena Paya Pajena Paritawa Viharati Aham Sukhitomi Nidukomi Aweromi Apia Pachomi Anigomi Sukhihatanang Pariharami Sabe Sata Sukhita Hontu Sabe Sata Havira Hontu Sabe Sata Hapiya Pachahuntu Sabe Sata Haniga Huntu Sabe Sata Sukhihatanang Pariharantu Sabe Sata Sabaduka Pamuchantu Sabe Sata Lata Sampatito Mavigachantu Sabe Sata Kama Saka Kama Dayata Kama Yoni Kama Bandhu Kama Pati Sarana Yang Kamang Kari Santi kalayanang vapapakang va tasadayata pavisanti. And perhaps we could finish with the closing homage. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Bhagava Buddhang Bhagavantang Abhivademi Sawakato Bhagavata Dhammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipanno Bhagavato Sāvaka Saṅkho Saṅghang Namami.
Friends, let's pay our respects to Ajahn as well. Bow. Bow. Bow.